I found her waiting in the dark, smiling with a mouth that didn't belong to any face I had ever known. When my sister left me the house, she joked that I was inheriting character, the kind that comes with warped floorboards and a lifetime of unpaid electricity bills. I laughed then, packed my things, and told myself the house would be quiet, an empty shell to be fixed and rented and moved on from. The first night, it welcomed me with a cold that seeped through the soles of my shoes, the kind of cold that tastes like metal at the back of your throat. The heat clicked on, the radiators clanked, and still the house felt held in the breath before a storm. The foyer smelled of dust and something older, stale rosewater and smoke, like a chapel after a funeral. Portraits hung in a crooked line along the landing, oval frames, faces looking sideways as if they had been interrupted mid-conversation 100 years ago. At the far end of the hall, behind a yellowing sheet, I found the poster. It was larger than I expected, canvas black and the words stamped across it in a deep, worn red, "The Ghost of the Bride." The lettering had the confidence of old movie houses and the softness of something pressed and kept. Beside the title, a face. Long hair like black threads, eyes blown empty and dark, lashes feathered with the suggestion of tears, a mouth too wide and teeth too many. It grinned at me the way a storm will grin when it has done with lightning. I half expected to laugh, to chalk it up to someone's taste in horror ephemera. Instead, my palms sweated and the house seemed to listen. I carried the poster into my living room and set it against the wall. The light from the lamp caught the red letters and the teeth, and everything settled into a long, taut silence. That night, the odd things began. At first, they were small, paper that had been flat, now folded at the corner, a ribbon on the mantel rearranged into a knot I had not tied. I told myself I'd done these things absent-mindedly, that moving in fractures your memory into a dozen small forgettings. But there were sounds that could not be explained away. The dragging of fabric, like a dress across hardwood above me at 3 in the morning. A soft, wet sound from the kitchen, as if something had been licked clean. A faint humming, a melody I couldn't place, like a hymn played backwards. Twice I woke to the sensation of being watched. Both times the lamp was dimmed to a single pool of light, and the house held its breath. Once when I crossed the hallway, the poster's eyes caught the lamp glow, and if my memory is not betraying me, reflected a light that shouldn't have been there, 2 pinpricks like distant stars. My throat closed then, and some small animal inside me curled up to wait. I told myself to sleep. I told myself to leave the poster on the floor and close the door. I told myself 100 sensible things. None of them stopped that night. The sound of something whispering my name from directly behind the wall. After a week, whatever patience I had was worn thin and frayed. The small things stopped feeling like forgetfulness and started to add up like coins in a jar, each one heavy and cold when you tipped it in your palm. The poster no longer sat politely against the wall. It moved. At first it leaned as if caught by a draft. Then one morning I found it hanging straight, centered above the mantel where nothing should have been nailed. The red letters looked fresher. The black around the eyes seemed to swallow more light. I told myself I had done it in a half-wake, a reflexal attempt to make the place feel like mine. That lie lasted until I found the shoe prints. They were on the stairs. Small, narrow, as though someone barefoot had stepped in something dark and left a print on each riser. They led past the landing, turned where the hallway met the kitchen, and stopped at the edge of my bedroom door. The prints were slightly too many. There were pauses between them as if someone had lingered, listening. The dreams began to take me by the throat. They were never bright scenes, but slow, tactile things. A hand on the back of my head, the press of a cheek against my ear, the scent of old roses and iron, and the metallic tang of decay. In the dream, I would reach for my phone, and the screen would be that same black canvas, the poster's teeth opening and opening until they swallowed my reflection whole. I woke with a taste of rust and something like sugar rotting at the back of my throat. Reality started to imitate the dreams. My phone battery would be drained to 0 by noon. On the footage of my security camera, footage I would watch with my coffee, wanting proof, needing a rational breadcrumb, there were black frames I could not scrub past, like someone had blinked the camera off and then on again. When the picture returned, the angle was different. The frame had shifted, as if someone had come close enough to breathe on the lens. Once, at 3 in the morning, I rewound and watched my sleeping self bolt upright with eyes wide and stare directly into the camera. My mouth was moving. There was a soft, readable movement in my lips, no sound. I pressed the speaker and heard only a ragged, backward hymn, as if a voice had been stifled and folded in on itself. Neighbors started to knock. Their faces were charity and curiosity. A woman in the building across the alley said she sometimes saw a bride in the window at night, though I had not hung any curtains. A child down the hall swore someone sang lullabies through the pipes. Everyone said I was pale, thin, words that felt like an accusation and a forecast. I tried to leave. Each time I packed a bag, something tugged at me, a shadow at my feet, a whisper from the radiator in a voice that sounded like my sister's when she used to sing in the car. Once, when I reached for the doorknob, I felt the cold press of a mouth against the soft skin of my palm, like someone pressing their lips to the inside of my wrist. I tasted sugar and rust. The poster changed that night. I noticed it first because the teeth were wet. When I stood, staring, the house hummed the hymn backwards until the sound pooled in my chest. The eyes, those empty pinpricks, caught the lamp, and for a heartbeat there was a reflection in them that was not the room. It was me, standing closer than I had been an hour before, but my smile was wrong. It was too wide, and somewhere behind that grin, something moved, like jawbones shifting under skin, like a curtain being pulled back to reveal not a face, but a pattern of teeth. My reflection in the window mimicked me, but with a patience I did not feel, like a waiting thing, practicing the shape of my fear. I stepped backward, and the floor whispered. The house answered. A soft dragging from the attic above announced itself, slow as if someone were pulling a dress across wooden boards. My throat closed and my knees trembled. I fumbled for something, anything, with which to anchor myself to the ordinary. My hand landed on a small scrap of paper folded into an arrow and placed on the table. In my own handwriting, in the shaky ink I knew well, were 3 words, "Don't leave me." I thought the note, "Don't leave me," was the last tether to whatever sanity I still clung to. I kept it folded in my pocket like a talisman, fingers worrying the paper until the edges were soft. The next morning I found it on the kitchen table, unfolded, the letters smudged as though wet. The house had a way of making all my small certainties leak out of me. That night I decided to burn the poster. I told myself it was symbolic. Destroy the image, destroy the thing. I set the canvas in the bathtub, lit a match, and watched the flame feather and take. The smell rose to meet me, old varnish, and something sweet, like sugared petals left to rot. For a moment, the flame was honest. It licked the edge and curled the ink. Then the fire blinked out as if someone had cupped the light with their hand. My fingers stung from the heat, and when I looked down, the poster was unscorched. The teeth were closer. I left the house then and walked without purpose, the city pressing around me like wet cloth. I walked until the air felt thin and the world had no corners. I called friends, tried to explain, and they gave me reasonable faces and reasonable solutions: sleep, medicine, daylight. I tried them all. Night kept finding me, like an animal with a sure nose. I would sleep in my car, in a cheap hotel, on a friend's couch, and the hymn would find the pipes and climb through them into my skull until the lyrics rearranged themselves into my name. When I returned, the lock on the front door was different. Not broken, changed. Someone had put fresh metal in place while I was gone. Inside, the house smelled of wet linen and something like dishwater steeped with iron. The poster hung in the stairwell, not on the wall but suspended midair, as though someone had sewn it into the dark. Her eyes were not empty now. They held a slow, patient life, like lanterns leaning toward me. I tried to rip it down. My hands did not obey me. The fingers that held the canvas felt like someone else's, cold and thin and patient. I felt at my throat and found a ribbon tied there, a strip of the same red as the lettering. It tugged tight if I moved, a soft restraint that hummed a note right through my bones. Panic opened behind my eyes, and I clawed at it until the skin on my knuckles split and the taste of my own blood was metallic and intimate. She came from the poster then, not all at once, but in the way night reveals the shape of things, a movement in the corner of my vision, a smell, a warm weight at the base of my skull. Her mouth pressed against my ear, and the hymn unspooled into words I understood too well. Stay, stay, stay. I wanted to scream, to run, to wake up someone who would take me for a drunk or a fool. The sound that left me was not my own. It was shaped like the poster's grin, wet and patient. When I look back now, if that is still a thing I can do, I see the marks on the floor where my feet had been. There are prints there, narrow and small, turning toward the bedroom and then looping back, as if someone had practiced the way I would walk. In the mirror, my face sometimes looks normal, a tired man's face with the day's grime under his nails. Other times, it is a study in wrongness, teeth too many, lips drawn wide in a smile that is not mine. I do not sleep for long. I do not stay awake for long. The house keeps time in a language I do not understand, and I answer because I do not remember how to refuse. I tried to leave again last week. I packed a bag, stuffed the note in the lining, and stepped to the door. The ribbon tightened of its own accord, and my reflection in the hallway window smiled before I did. I opened my mouth to speak and heard the hymn, backwards and patient, and then my own voice coming out with the wrong shape. Now, when the neighbors look up at my windows at night, they see a bride moving slowly behind the glass. Long hair, dark eyes, a grin that waits. I have called them from inside my head sometimes, and they have come, touched the poster, and left with the same tired look I once had. I saw my sister the other day, and she did not know me. She apologized for leaving the house in my hands. There is a softness sometimes, like a hand smoothing the hair from my forehead. There is also a hunger. I wake with the taste of someone else's teeth on my tongue. I have learned to listen for the hymn and to answer with its echo. It tells me to stay. She smiles with my mouth.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.